I'm Jeanette Stokes. I graduated from the Divinity School at Duke in 1977, and I live here in Durham, and I'm the director of the Resource Center for Women and Ministry in the South. Being Presbyterian and coming from a family of faith is part of the birthright waters in which I swam. I will note that just as being a racist is part of that growing up and the water I swim in, I work all the time to get that to transmute to justice actions. The faith part seemed to be workable. It gave me something to rely on that's larger than myself, a community to belong to, and also a lot of the justice-seeking people I have known in my adult life have been faith-based. One of the reasons I stayed in the South was that faith still functions at the level of corporate life, of public policy here in the South, in the way that it doesn't quite as much in New England or in California. People actually go to church and learn things and lobby and do things at other churches for good and for not so good. I do not actually remember. I think that we may have felt like we were inventing it together, because a lot of the women I was in seminary with had not had known women ministers before, but we were sort of the generation that was saying, we can be whatever we want to be. We can be women doctors, we can be lawyers, we can be ministers. So I graduated from college in 1973 on the crest of the wave of the largest number of women in this country going to graduate and professional schools ever. So I moved to Durham not being quite sure what I was going to do, and I eventually decided to go to the Divinity School, even though I knew it was mostly full of white, male, married Methodists. I just went through all my classes raising my hand and saying, what about the women? And the men, male professors would often look at me and say, I don't know, but why don't you do some research and write a paper, which I did over and over again. So I kept asking that question. I thought of myself as somebody who'd grown up in the country who was sort of middle of the road. I was not a radical at my New England college, but I got to Duke Divinity School with all these Southern white men, and sometimes the sea would part as I walked down the hall. There were guys who were kind of, I learned later at reunion, sort of scared of me. I was like, because I was saying what I thought. When I graduated from college, and again when I was getting ready to graduate from Divinity School, I remember saying to people, I don't think I'm the kind of person who can teach a classroom with the same people doing basically similar things day after day, year after year, or work in a church and there is a repetitive quality. So when I was getting ready to graduate from seminary, I went to see Helen Crotwell, who was on the staff of the chapel at Duke, and said, what am I going to do? I can't be a student anymore. Do I just go get a job in a Presbyterian church somewhere? And she looked at me and she said, Jeanette, nothing you have ever done or said suggested to me that you wanted to be a minister in a local church. You should do that if you want to. But I think, she said, that you should do something that no one else is going to do. Once I decided I might want to pursue ordination, I went to see the officials at my presbytery. So I sat down in this small office with these two men who seemed friendly, but I had never met them before. And they looked at me and said, the church doesn't want people who look like you. I mean, I almost stopped breathing. I didn't expect them to be hostile. I think what they meant was the church at this moment in time is not being very receptive to people who look like you. We just need for you to know what you're walking into. But what they said was, the church doesn't want people who look like you. And I think what I said back to them, I wish I had written it down carefully at the time, but I think what I said back to them was, I know, I'm here to change that. I graduated from the Divinity School in the middle of May. I had become friends with my mentor, Helen Crotwell, who was part of the chapel staff at that point. And she evidently had recommended that I preach. It was the Sunday after graduation, so most people were gone, and it was not a very popular slot. So, I mean, that's what I could see in hindsight, but I was thrilled to be asked. And it was, I have to tell you, it was the first time I had preached in public. So what I remember is sitting in a chapel robe up on a wooden chair behind the pulpit and being so nervous. I still have nightmares about this to this day, 40 some years later, sitting there being so nervous that I was afraid I was gonna pee on the seat. And I had learned, somebody had told me about nervousness, that if you pick your feet up, you can't. So I was sitting there going, I'm gonna survive this. I'm not gonna embarrass myself. And then it came time, and I'm 5'1", and this pulpit is more than 5 feet off the ground, and I could barely see over it, even with a box that they'd put there for me. I couldn't see the first 6 rows of the congregation, and I was fine. And I delivered my very carefully prepared sermon, as I recall, word for word. May have been the only time I did that. You know, I had it typed really big and with a lot of space on the page. But I remember nothing else. And I think that if I had thought more about the context, there was every reason for me to be frightened. I was stepping into an arena of work that had hundreds of years behind it of not really wanting me to do that. 20 some years later, I preached at a large Baptist church in Charlotte, Myers Park. And in that sermon, I was able to say out loud, you know, I've been doing something nobody wanted me to do. I mean, hundreds of years of history of church. No one didn't want for women to speak in that context. So I think that the nervousness was not just performance anxiety, but it was also the sort of, I guess, momentousness of my stepping into that role. Some women older than I had started a women's center at the Divinity School at Duke, but it was just a tiny office in the basement of the Divinity School with these 2 important things, a desk and a phone. The women ahead of me started in forming support groups and also thinking about how to do transformation of the curriculum. And the woman who was the first director decided to go back to New Jersey at the end of that first year I was in seminary, and I stepped in to cover for the summer and then stayed for the next year. So I was the second director of the Women's Center at Duke. And that first summer, no one had ever been the director of the Women's Center in the summer because it had started in the fall. And so I just thought that I should go visit the women who were doing field education sprinkled all over North Carolina. And what I learned was that not all of them were having a good experience. Some of them were being sexually harassed by their pastors they were working for, or by an older man in the congregation. I remember one woman telling me she got her boyfriend to come and visit as often as possible to be visible. And I had no idea that that kind of thing happened to working women. I didn't realize that this was something that in ministerial training people would run up on. I think I was naive and thought that religious work was somehow going to be safe. So anyway, when we came back to school, I said, we've got to do some things to make sure that the field education office understands people's experience and that the faculty really begin to understand why they need to teach about women and they need more women on the faculty. These days, what I enjoy most is working with younger people. I'm 68. I remember when I discovered that my friends who are about 15, 18 years younger had different knee-jerk reactions to political issues and various things. And you go another 15 or 20 years younger and people just see the world differently. So I enjoy that a lot. I find most challenging and rewarding our work on race. We sponsor anti-racism workshops. Anybody is welcome at those. We have a reading group on race. So work on trying to figure out what white people's responsibility is. We caused the mess in this country by creating the worst slavery system in the world based on race. And we live in this country with that legacy, and in a country where most people won't even talk about it. But so I find that work challenging and rewarding. What's an organization that's 42 years old, that's been historically white and women with education and access to resources supposed to be doing in this day and age to work on the side of justice? And it's not enough anymore to just talk about women. To work on a diversity of issues today. What does justice look like for everyone? What do reparations look like? What does it matter that the resources in this country have been sucked up by white people? Yeah, that's what's most satisfying. My first advice is usually a question. Have you had a good experience in your local congregation? And often people say, oh yes, I've loved that. I've been a leader. I've been the moderator of our governing board at the local church, or I've been the president of the women of the church, or whatever. And I often say one of the things that you may want to consider is that that might have been more fun and more rewarding than the kind of work that will come to you as a minister. So I'm not a huge promoter of anybody entering ministry because of the way it's designed. Most of the church jobs for ministers are too big for humans to have. They were designed for men who would have a supportive spouse doing half of life. So the jobs are so large these days, even in small churches. It's like being the parent of a huge family. So I think ministry in churches today is very challenging. So I don't encourage people in that direction. But if they're headed that way and I am asked for advice, I say, here's your number one job. Get support for yourself that's not from people in your congregation, because you will need it. It's hard work. It wears people down. They take on the burdens of the people that they work with. And if you don't have a network of support, you will probably crumble under it.